Hello everyone, Christopher Beast here, and today's video isn't like most other videos I make. This will be a long science video talking about the radiation storms found in Vigor. Today's video's goal is to attempt to answer what type of radiation storms we are seeing in Vigor, how it affects you in the short term, its long-term effects, and finally what we could do as an Outlander to counter the effects of the radiation. So to start, I have to clarify something. Radiation doesn't just travel in the air. Actually, radiation is a form of energy that is on items and, is not good for you. I mean, I'm not a science teacher. I'm not going to teach you what radiation is today. But you should know that, at least according to my knowledge and what I could find, radiation doesn't just, willy-nilly get blown around in the air. So in order for radiation to travel through the air, it has to latch onto something, whether this be water or dust or whatever. So in order for the storms we see in Vigor to occur, it's not like the radiation is just blowing into the area and, happening. That's just not how things work. So what are two potential ideas on how radiation Vigor does work? Well, first we have the idea that's seen throughout most of science fiction, which is radioactive rainstorms. Great examples of this would be Vigor, Stalker, and Metro. All three games, to some differing amounts of degree, show radioactive rainstorms. Fallout, you see it a little bit in a more like, you have both regular storms and radioactive storms, and in Metro and Stalker, you just have radioactive rainstorms. This would occur by a large amount of radioactive materials getting into the water table, and then as a result, getting up into the clouds, and then coming down as a precipitate. This is not what's happening in Vigor from what we can observe. The storm at the end of the round doesn't have any rain effects, and doesn't seem to be coming from a rainstorm. So if it's not coming from a rainstorm, then it isn't a radioactive rainstorm. There's no mid-round where it's like, okay, it's raining but there's no clouds, or it's raining but there's no water. No, this is not a radioactive rainstorm. It's not like what you see in Fallout and other games. So what is it? It's most likely a dust storm, a radioactive dust storm. This is something that has been seen in real life as well. It occurred at Chernobyl, for one example. A dust storm found at Chernobyl, for example, was recorded on September 5th, 1992, which was several years after the meltdown at Chernobyl. The dust recorded there had very large concentrations of radioactive aerosol in the air. This radioactive aerosol was found 10 to 100 times more than the surrounding area. We're talking about the area surrounding Chernobyl, so it's already very, very radioactive. So since there's a rapid increase in the aerosols, it would have been very dangerous to anyone in there, and anyone who would have been in the area would have had a chance of death due to the trace amounts of toxins that were found within the dust storm. So what does this mean for our case? Well, in our case, we're not talking several years after a meltdown, we're talking 1 to 2, and it's not a meltdown, it's a nuclear annihilation. I am going to briefly mention here, and I won't talk too much about it, that a lot of scientists agree that if a nuclear storm, this nuclear annihilation in the form that Vigor suggests, were to actually occur, we would have what's called a nuclear winter, where the sky would be blotted out by dust and radioactive material for hundreds of years, possibly, which would cause the entire surface of the planet to freeze and most things to die because there would be no sunlight. We don't see that in Vigor. I'm pretty sure all of you know that there's sunlight in Vigor. If you didn't know that, I don't know what game you're playing. So luckily, our Outlanders don't have to worry about a nuclear winter. So back to what I was saying about the dust storm. So the dust storm in Chernobyl seemingly made the radioactive contaminants in the area more concentrated and more, just blowing. Not good at all. The importance that we can take away here, and why I'm so sure that what we're seeing in Vigor is a radioactive dust storm, is the dust storm was not visible to visual eye. It just looked like a windstorm or just, strong winds occurring. The toxins in the dust would be enough of a prolonged experience to kill you on the spot, which is something we see in Vigor. We do see our character eventually fall down and die. And finally, it would come in much like the wind, meaning it could come from one side of the map, blow across the map until it entirely covers the map. That all could happen in this situation. So what exactly would this storm's effects be on a human? Again, going back to Chernobyl, the dust would be toxic. So this is like it's observable thing. Like a dust storm has happened in real life. So we know that this is a possibility of toxicity, but where the question comes in with our character and Vigor is what exactly is killing them? So in Chernobyl, in the examples of Chernobyl, nobody actually died. Most people found out about the storm, were able to evacuate and survive because, I mean, everybody knows that Chernobyl was a nuclear site. Everybody knew what to do, had plenty warning, and were perfectly fine. Our character also has warning in his little tomato timer, but we as players like to walk into the radiation. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's because we're a little dull. So what could it be that's killing us there? Well, there's a couple possible suspects. The first reason would be that you have the dust in the air, it's toxic. It has radioactive aerosols and toxins in it. Perhaps if there's enough of us inhaling it, it would build up within our lungs and kill us. It could also be the sheer density of the dust in the storm. If there is enough radiation in the storm, for it to build like just enough radiation in the dust that's in the storm, the radiation in the air would be a high enough level to cause death. An example of radiation in the air killing people is the sarcophagus in Chernobyl. It's really just prolonged experience in that as well can kill you. I personally think that a consumable introduced in Season 4 can help us find out which one of the two it actually is. The consumable was iodine. Iodine is a great thing in real life if you don't like radiation. However, iodine cannot stop the toxicity of dust. At least to my knowledge, it can't. And it would require more protection if it actually was the dust being toxic and building up in our lungs. Things such as gas masks would help with that and other things. But since we don't need gas masks to survive in Vigor, I'm going to rule out the dust option. So my conclusion is what's actually killing us is a dust storm with huge amounts of radiation in the dust, which radiates out, irradiating us and killing us over time. So now that we know what type of storm we're facing, what exactly is causing it? Well, I don't think I need to answer this. It's nukes. My conclusion, though, and why I even bring this up in the video, is because we are not facing a nuclear winter, which could be used as evidence, and I'm not going to argue this too much today. I don't know if I'll ever come back to this point, but I think I just want to plop the thought in your mind so you can contemplate it yourself. But maybe there wasn't a full-blown nuclear war. I'm not saying there wasn't a nuclear war at all, but I'm saying maybe both sides, the US and Russia, didn't fire everything in their arsenal. Because if there was, we would be seeing much larger dust storms and we would be seeing a nuclear winter. Another opportunity to think about here is in some nuclear winter models, it says that the areas closer to the equator would amass more nuclear radiation and more nuclear dust than the areas on the poles. If we believe those models, that could also explain what's going on here and completely take my idea and throw it out the window. But that's not all scientific models. Not all scientific models agree that areas near the poles would have less radiation and less dust. Some think, no, the entire planet would be covered. So what would be the long-term effects of these storms? Well, it's simple. Just like any other form of radiation, it's not good for you. You would increase your chances of getting cancer and growing tumors, and if exposed for long enough, you could have other health concerns like heart disease and even sterilization. All horrible things. So keep your Outlander out of the radiation. While I'm on the topic of radiation, and because I don't think there'll be ever another video where I'm able to bring up this point, our Outlander is most likely not going to be able to have another generation. I know this is a really weird fucking thing to mention, but the amount of radiation in the area, even if we're not in the radiation storm, just, runoff radiation, is most likely enough to cause deformities and mutations that would be fatal to young children. An example of Chernobyl, Fukushima, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, a lot of the people living around those areas had slight birth rate declines, but not large. But keeping in mind, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Fukushima, and Chernobyl would all have far lower levels of surrounding radiation than a full-blown nuclear war would. With all of that under the way, we now exactly understand what's going on here, and we now have now we have to understand what can we do to prevent our Outlander from suffering. All these long-term and short-term effects, they sound horrible. Well, the simplest way to make sure your Outlander doesn't have to suffer through this stuff is get out when your tomato timer goes off. But as an aggressive player myself, and I'm sure a lot of you watching, don't really want to just leave when the timer goes off. So, what are the other things we can do? Well, lead-lined clothing. Lead is a great thing to prevent radiation poisoning. It's really absorbing of radiation, and most things in the real world that are trying to prevent runoff radiation, such as x-ray machines and other things, will have themselves protected by lead to be the barrier between the producer and the person. The other thing is you want to eat a lot of foods that produce antioxidants. A great example of one you can find in game is lingo berries. I talked about them in an earlier video. They're great, small little red berries you can find on the bushes. If your character eats piles of those things, you'll produce a lot of antioxidants, which will help his immune system fight radiation better. Finally, don't step out on your iodine. Iodine is going to be key to keeping your Outlander alive if he's actually exposing himself to large periods of radiation, as iodine will, be your last line of defense between you and dying from radiation. I hope everybody enjoyed this video. I spent a lot of time doing research for it. I hope you learned something. I know I did. I tried to keep it interesting, but my voice is kind of monotone, and I'm a little quiet. My throat hurts a little bit. I hope I'll see you all next time. Drop any comments if you have any interesting facts about radiation that I didn't cover in this video. And this has been Christopher Beast. Ciao.